It's Leandra here from PaperArtsy again, and I've got another grunge paste video for you. This time I'm just going to show you how to use it through stencils. Grunge paste is a really fun way to make lots of texture onto a surface. As you can see, it's quite smooth and runny, and it always pays to give it a little bit of a stir up before you start. So we don't need that much grunge paste when we're going through stencils. It just depends how thickly you want to apply it. But I quite like using a palette knife. This palette knife has got a sort of a straight edge on one side, so it means that I can sort of smooth it off as I go. So I'm just popping it through there. Going to get a little bit more. Now if you put it on much thicker in some areas, then when you lift off the stencil you'll actually have a much thicker application than if you scrape it back. So I'm going to show you the difference between the two. Scraping it back, you just sort of put it on and scrape as you go, like that. And I quite like doing it this way when I'm demoing, because it dries so much faster because you've got a much thinner amount of paste on there. But if you've got time to wait, then put it on a lot thicker and you'll see the difference. You can get quite a significantly more grunge paste on there. Now I've just put a little tab using masking tape on the side of this stencil so that it's easy to lift it up, and then you just lift it off and straight away you've got a thicker area down the bottom here and thinner areas up the top. Now to clean the stencil, I'm going to put that aside to dry. I've got another one I did earlier which is all ready to go, but I often get asked about cleaning stencils. The way I do it is I just put the stencil down like that. I'll scrape off the excess and put that in the pot, and then I just spritz the stencil with water. And you can see the grunge paste just sort of dissolves immediately in the water there. So if you take a baby wipe and you can kind of wipe off the excess and then turn over and sort of check the other side as well, because sometimes you'll get a little bit on the back, but generally I find with the grunge paste it doesn't seem to seep underneath. Okay, so once we've got our finished item, I'm just going to give you some ideas about how you might want to paint this. I'm just putting a layer of snowflake on here to begin with, and the first coat of paint you really need to sort of work it in and around the texture. I've got some other weirdo colours that were on this brush before coming through, but it doesn't really matter. Just got to start somewhere. So you've probably heard me say before, I tend not to use gesso anymore because the fresco paints are such a lovely chalky finish. It's almost like they've got a built-in gesso in the product. So it's really not necessary to base coat with anything before using fresco chalk acrylic paint. So that is snowflake with a tint of various other things coming. Actually quite liking the shabby chic effects we're getting here. So I was going to put a little bit of blue on top and just start to sort of build it up. So this is one of the new colours of paint that we've got called Bora Bora, and it's darker than Mermaid, and it's also opaque. You sort of can do a nice little dry brush technique over the top, just putting a little bit of paint on there, or you can work it right in there so that you've got it all snuggled up around the grooves. It just depends, you know, I sort of tend to do a bit of both and just see what happens. Definitely I was using chocolate pudding on this brush beforehand because that's what's coming through. And a bit of clarets on there too. Actually might be blood orange. just notch it up with a bit of a darker colour. This one is South Pacific. I don't want loads of it, and I'm just going to get rid of some of the excess paint on a paper towel, and then pick that up and just start to sort of tickle it over, build a bit of depth in a few places. Okay, right, let's go to something contrasting. So this one is blood orange. It's a really pretty colour and it looks really good with the blues. If you've got wet and wet, you will get purple, but you can make some cool purples with blood orange by mixing them together, which is quite a nice option. I might get a bit of water. See how you get the water and the paint just travels so it sinks down into those dips. And let's try knocking that back with a baby wipe a little bit, softening it off. Well, that's quite nice because it's really exposed back to the grunge paste. Now I'm just going to give that a bit of a zap dry. Try and clean up here. And now if we get a sanding block, and you can always highlight your grunge paste. I'm just trying to be a bit gentle because I'm not convinced that I've dried that very thoroughly. But you get the idea where you can just expose a little bit. Now a cool thing to do around the edge of this would be some distress ink, because I've exposed the edge of the paper there. And we can just darken those edges. Now just remember that this distress ink is going on top of a sealed surface because the paint has sealed the surface properly. So if you were to come over the top with a baby wipe, it would just wipe off, or if you were to use something slightly fluid on there, it would also wipe off. So it's not going to be totally permanent, but the edges where the paper tag was exposed again will be. Now I can come over the top of that texture with some treasure gold to just highlight the texture, or even moving up to a darker shade of ink. You know, there's just so many things you can do, or you can even sort of knock it back again with your sanding block if you wish. There's just so many options with this. Okay, so that's one way of doing a coloured distress background with the grunge paste.